Uh, Welcome to the March 9th Speak Up Newport program on homelessness. This is our third program on this subject. The last one we did was almost 2 years ago, so I think there's a lot that's happened since then. So we're interested in hearing what's been going on. My name's Ed Selich. I'm president of Speak Up Newport. We're now back to live programming here in the community room, but we're still doing our program on Zoom. So we've got tonight, in addition to the audience here this evening, we've got over 100 people that are watching us on Zoom. Plus, we're also being broadcast live on NBTV and on cable channels 3 for Spectrum and 852 for Cox. And if that isn't enough, you can watch a video replay on our website or on YouTube. So we're kind of covered in a lot of different bases there. I also want to remind everyone that the February 10th Mayor's Dinner was canceled, or postponed, I should say, till May the 19th. Individual tickets and underwriter tables are still available, so you can go to our website, www.speakupnewport.com, if you'd like to do an underwriter table or purchase some individual tickets. I'd like to thank the Bungalow for all the food. I hope you guys enjoyed that this evening. Do a great job for us every time. So as I said, our program this evening is on homelessness, and our speakers are Natalie Basmaciyan, the city's homeless coordinator, and Lieutenant Pete Carpentieri. I'm sorry I butchered that. And Pete's with our police department. And our moderator today is Speak Up Newport Board member Tony Petros, and he's going to introduce our speakers. Tony?
Thank you, Ed. Good evening. There'll always be poor people in the land. Sounds like something the governor would say, or maybe a county supervisor or even a city council member. But these are actually the words of Moses as he handed down the law to the Israelites. Many years later, a very popular carpenter out of Bethlehem also noted, "The poor you will always have with you." When rigorous studies first started here in town, Newport Beach reported about 85 homeless residing in the city. After engaging with CityNet and undertaking many of the initiatives that our speakers will describe, that number went down to about 60 individuals. And in the most recent point-in-time survey, 45 homeless individuals were here in Newport Beach. Speak Up Newport has created this opportunity for you to learn the facts behind our homeless issues, what enforcement actions are being taken, and what opportunities are being offered. We're joined by two experts in the field to describe these efforts. Lieutenant Peter C. began his law enforcement career in the New York City Police Department in 2003. Since 2009, he's been with us in Newport Beach, holding a variety of positions. He's currently assigned the Patrol Division as the Area 1 Commander, and he is responsible for the Homeless Liaison Task Force and the Officer Field Training Officer Program, Mounted Unit, the Boardwalk Ambassador Program, and many others. We'll start our presentation with Lieutenant Peter.
You ready to start it, or? Okay, well, thank you for that introduction, Tony, and thank you, Ed. Thank you to Speak Up Newport, and thank you all for being here today. I made sure to put a slide in here to talk about, what you guys represent to the community and how important it is that you guys are here today participating in public safety-related events, having investment in quality of life issues and crime and things like that in the community. It means a lot. I work in this city. I don't live in this city. And you guys, the level of engagement and ownership, the citizenry, the business owners, the people who visit here have in this city make it a very enjoyable place to live, work, and visit. I just like to put that out there so you know that's where my heart is for the city of Newport Beach, out of the gate. And it's Carpentieri, or Carpentieri. It's just, but it was well done. So Tony had mentioned, just part of my role at NBPD, I'm an area commander. So I'm responsible for the Balboa Peninsula. We call that Area 1. But as part of that responsibility, I'm responsible for the Peninsula Enforcement Team. That's a sergeant, 3 bike patrol officers, and the homeless liaison officer. So what that means is from January 21 to present, more and more time has been spent by city staff and by the Newport Beach Police Department on homeless-related issues. And the pet sergeant and myself have been increasingly active with this issue specifically. I'm now responsible to help coordinate the Newport Beach Police Department's activity with respect to Natalie and the great work she does at city manager level, city manager's office, Be Well, and other city departments like Public Works and our recreation department and so on. So basically what I have here for you today is essentially a handle on what the resources the city has to deal with this issue and what do those resources actually do. So I'm going to walk you through that and then talk about some of the challenges that we have dealing with the issue of homelessness and answer all your questions. So what are the city's resources to address this issue? Well, we have patrol officers, okay? All of our patrol officers are out there. They're all trained in the enforcement of different types of crimes, our municipal code and different things like that. And they also can do outreach. We also have Sergeant Jennifer Kresge and Officer Cynthia Carter, who are the homeless liaison officer and the sergeant of the Peninsula Enforcement Team. I want to make a point to just recognize them. These are fantastic people. Anybody who's ever worked with them or dealt with them know that. They are super invested, super compassionate, super tough, and super sharp, and they're truly taking ownership of this issue. I am beyond appreciative of the work that they've done for the police department, and we're very fortunate to have their personnel. And much of what I'll talk to you about today and any type of subject matter expertise I may have on this topic has been born from the hard work that they've done before me. We also have another resource the police department has specifically is we have a member of the Orange County Mental Health Team who rides with one of our officers 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Wednesdays, typically during the daytime. And that person is capable of placing people on emergency psychiatric holds. And obviously, many members of the homeless community suffer from a lot of mental health issues. So having a person, a clinician who's trained to do those holds and navigate that process with the county and other area hospitals is very, very helpful to have. That's another resource that we have. Obviously, Natalie's here, and she's wonderful. If you don't know her, you'll meet her and get a sense of her great breadth of knowledge on the subject today. Public Works, a lot of people may not know this. I always make a point to mention this. I'm not trying to kiss up to the Public Works director at all, but I do want to recognize the very dirty job that Public Works does in this city to help clean up some of these encampments and the tents that you see. A lot of what you see when you see a change in what it looks like has a lot to do with the removal of the tents and the garbage and the encampments. That's the kind of thing that really causes a lot of concern and anxiety for people, beyond maybe creating a public health hazard or maybe making the environment more welcoming for other people who might want to come here and maybe cause disturbances or cause nuisances. So our Public Works does a lot of the cleaning and the maintenance of our city, and they do a lot of that property removal, and I'd be remiss not to mention that and highlight them as a critical resource in the city's plan to deal with homelessness. And all our other city staff folks, like people from Parks and Recreation, they're responsible for all the public facilities. So they're in the know about who's there, what they're doing. They're very sensitive to making sure the public has rights of access, and the people reserving and getting permits to do activities in and around places like Marina Park and things like that are able to do that as free as possible from interference from what is an understandably a significant homeless problem that our city and other cities do deal with. And then we have contracted staff that connects people in the homeless community to care and to housing. Folks like CityNet, have you heard of CityNet and Be Well? Those are probably, if you're in the know, you kind of know what those resources are. CityNet's essentially social service workers who help navigate people in the homeless community and connect them to housing. And when we talk about housing, we're talking about permanent supportive housing, long-term housing, not necessarily a temporary shelter. And when we talk about Be Well now, who just came live with a full implementation a couple weeks ago, those people are basically trained crisis counselors who will go out in the community and be like a first response field person who can, besides the police department and besides an Orange County mental health clinician, try to get somebody connected with services that they may need. It could be medical services, it could be psychiatric services, it could be any other type of social services, transports to places that they need to go. And I'll talk more about it, and Natalie will talk more about what Be Well does in a little while. They're working 7 days a week right now. They have that big blue van, if you haven't seen it, in some city messaging, but you'll start to see it. It's a very, very large blue van, and you can't miss it. And they work 12 hours a day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And also, lastly, as a major resource, the city is contracted with Costa Mesa for beds in the bridge shelter. We have 20 beds out of their roughly 70 beds that they have in the shelter. And as of right now, I would say about 15 of beds are full. I feel like we floated 17 to 20 for a while, and there's a couple reasons for that, but 15 is actually a lower number than we've been for some time. So great, the city has all these resources. Well, what does that mean? What are we actually doing with all that stuff? What are we doing with the money that's being spent to do all this stuff? Well, enforcement. Obviously, that's a very basic piece of how we can deal with chronic disturbances and violations of law in the community. The Newport Beach Police Department does a lot of enforcement, and our goal is to deter future bad behavior, future criminal behavior through citations, arrests, and things like that. I talked about the emergency psychiatric care through usually what's called the 5150 Welfare Institutions Code hold. I want to just mention very briefly that just because somebody's placed on such a hold, and I think I was talking about with Tony a little bit before, it's not like they're whisked off and they're gone. They could be back very, very quickly to the same street situation that they just came from. Much like the enforcement process through going to a jail or prison temporarily, going to a psychiatric facility for some emergency care, they might get evaluated by a doctor, and it doesn't mean it's for 72 hours. It could be a few hours. And they might get some medication, they might get a different assessment from a physician, they might get a follow-up plan of care, and they're out. And that's just a reality of that process and system, sometimes tragically, and sometimes unfortunately for a community that's trying to address a disorderly or somebody who has apparent mental health issues in their community. They want that person to get help. And outreach. A lot of what we do now is based upon the model of outreach. Outreach is everything from medical and mental health services, getting people placement in detoxification treatment facilities, getting people something as simple as family reunification. These are things I didn't know about before we started doing this work. We may have people living in our city who are homeless who just need to be connected back with a family member who's in another state who would welcome them back if they had the means of connecting with them, or maybe the cab fare or whatever it may be, the bus fare to get to that location. So family reunification is one of these very wonderful things that may happen in the right situation, and that's another thing that has to be facilitated by outreach. You have shelter placement. This is the temporary shelter placement. We're talking about the Costa Mesa Bridge shelter, other shelters in the county, where the intent of that stay is for it to be temporary. They're not supposed to be there forever. It's not an ideal situation. The goal is that's a bridge to long-term supportive housing, or have them get on their feet on their own without any aid from the state. And then environmental concerns. I talked about public works. They're going to do pressure washing of sidewalks. They're going to be the ones cleaning out the bathrooms and doing things like that. Other types of public areas by the pier and something I've talked about with gentlemen before I did the presentation. And the removal of what we call bulk property. This could be abandoned property. This could be property that's associated with somebody that we arrest. The city has a process by which if we identify unattended what we call bulk property. Think of a tent or encampment. Maybe nobody's associated with it. Maybe there's nobody there. It could be tagged for removal. And there's some legal requirements we have to work under to do that. But basically within a 24-hour period, we can take that property and get rid of what's contaminated, what's a hazard to public health, unsanitary, and anything valuable we can keep at the city yard and for it to be claimed at a later date, and then we can still dispose of it. It's a complicated process, but in short, we do that, and Public Works is a large piece of that. We also have Public Works assist us with the removal of large amounts of bulk property when we effect an arrest of somebody. So what does it happen when someplace like today it looked one way, or yesterday it looked one way, and then the next day it looks a little bit better? Typically what has happened is there's been either enforcement or outreach that's been successful on a particular person, and then there was the removal of the bulk property. I mean, that's what we're talking about. When you see the visible feel of a place looking better, that's usually what has happened. So now, some notable hotspots in the city. It's not all inclusive, but I just give you a list of some of the stuff that's on our radar and what we're working with. Some of you probably will be well familiar with some of these areas as an issue for our city. The Newport Pier, the Balboa Pier, the Bay Bridge, the Transportation Center, other locations on this list. I could talk a little bit more later, but basically we're looking at trying to identify what is the real problem that we have that might be drawing and creating a disorderly environment that's becoming a chronic issue, and trying to flood that with the proper resources to make sure that we're mitigating that to the best we can lawfully. And these hotspots are places that we are currently working on to do that very thing. Some challenges, and I think this might be one of the more interesting parts to talk about, because I hate to say we can't do anything is completely wrong. to say that we can do a lot, but there's a lot of challenges with making long-term solutions with what we can do. That's very, very fair. And I'll walk you through a little bit of the knowledge to help you guys feel better about that. Shelter bed availability, I talk about it with Natalie. It's probably the number one issue, county and statewide. There's just not usually enough shelter beds for everybody who wants them at a given point of time. Keep in mind, that's a voluntary thing that people have to want it. As an example, today we had somebody from the transportation center who had wanted a shelter bed, and we arranged an appointment at 5 o'clock to effect that transport. We did that transport, they arrived, they changed their mind. So this is a recurring challenge that we have to deal with because the shelters are voluntary. Now, the shelter bed availability was an issue pre-pandemic, just from a resource standpoint across, again, the county and state. It was exacerbated by COVID. We're coming out of that a little bit, but there are certain rules that facilities have to follow with lockdowns or requirements for entry, like negative COVID tests, things like that. That was something that plagued us, and we had our shelter closed, was it for 8 weeks or more? And 3 times over the last year period, mainly through that fall, winter hit of COVID, which made it harder for us to have a shelter bed available. Some of you may be familiar, if you're in the know, with this court case, Martin versus Boise in 2018. Essentially, we have a camping ordinance in Newport, which means you can't camp on public property. And so everybody sees a camp on public property, and you're like, why are we not doing something about that? And it makes a lot of sense. It's a great question. It's a very reasonable question. Well, when this court case came down in 2018, it basically ruled that municipalities cannot enforce camping if they don't have a shelter bed alternative to offer somebody. So when my shelter beds are filled, my officers can't do camping. If the shelter beds are not filled, but the shelter was closed because of COVID, I can't do camping. You tracking on that? So that just makes that one little municipal code violation, which might be the only violation a particular member of the homeless community is doing at that time, unenforceable for our officers. Not always the case. We do camping enforcement. We've done it. We can do arrests. We do cites. And I'll talk more about what that could mean. But that's an issue with the camping ordinance specifically if you're interested in that. I've talked a lot about this, and I kind of have a perspective on this. And I say enforcement works through the threats of fines or incarceration. Big picture. Okay, for the people in this room, you don't want... If it's in your internal ethic to do the right thing, that's beautiful. I'm sure it is. And you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. But for people who don't have that ethic, they sometimes choose to do the right thing because of the fear that if they do the wrong thing, it's going to cost them. And if they do the wrong thing, they're going to go to jail. And so with the homeless community, what you have to understand is there's a couple nuances there. One is that if somebody doesn't have the means to pay any of the fines don't matter. If somebody, a momentary incarceration in my fairly clean Newport Beach jail facility where we'll give them food and we'll give them clothing isn't necessarily this powerful deterrent for somebody living in a tent or on the street in a urine and rat-infested encampment. It just doesn't have that same powerful effect. I'm sure all of you would rather be in your beds tonight than be in my jail, however much I preach about the cleanliness and the quality of the people who work there. So that's not necessarily a powerful deterrent for many members of this community. In cases that remember, enforcement is just one piece. You need a filing. You need a district attorney to file the case and pursue it through the adjudication process. If the filing doesn't exist because the case is dismissed or never filed for whatever reason, the enforcement kind of dies off as even being a factor. So penalties only come after enforcement, filing, and then a conviction, adjudication that reaches to the level of a conviction. And even then, the penalties might not be as significant. As a quick example, we had an assault with a deadly weapon occur on the Balboa Peninsula last year. We had arrested the offender. They were convicted. They went to prison, and they were out 6 months later. This was a case where the actual incident was captured on video. This wasn't a he said, she said. This was a pretty clear, easy case for the district attorney's office to win. They won it, and the end result of that was the same person who did it was back in the same spot living in our city, not anymore, but at the time came right back to the same spot 6 months after they were arrested. To give you I use that example not to make you feel terrible about life and living out here, but more just to give you a sense that if that's 6 months for an attempt murderer, the urinating in public is not going to be a very heavy hit on the penalty. So, which is something that we get a lot with the quality of life observations of offenses. I bring all that up just to tell you enforcement by itself, from the police department's perspective, we learned it doesn't always affect a long-term change. It's not working sufficiently. I can arrest people and I cite people all day long. We do that. It doesn't necessarily affect a long-term change. And I put this there, and I did a town hall last week, and I made a point to say I've bolded this, I've underlined it, I've italicized it. I really want to reassure you. The Newport Beach Police Department does all enforcement possible. If something should be cited, we cite it. If somebody should be arrested, we arrest them. Many cities, with a lot of the law changes to make a lot of crimes misdemeanors instead of felonies, they'll issue a citation in the field. We'll arrest those people still for drug offenses and things like that. So the Newport Beach Police Department isn't shy about enforcement, but we have to be honest about the reality that just because I can feel good that I tell you we did it doesn't mean that that's going to affect the long-term change in what you're seeing out in the street. And just as a reminder, homelessness in and of itself is not a crime. Camping could be a violation of our municipal code, but homelessness as a general principle is not a crime. So the outreach has been a big focus. That's what we've seen affect more of a long-term change. I would say, and this number is growing almost weekly, but we've had about 70 plus what we call street exits since about 2019 with this outreach approach. That's people getting sheltered, permanent supportive housing, family reunification, detox facility, getting out of the street environment that they live in. But understand, even hearing the dynamic about the transportation center person today, that process is labor intensive and takes time. One of the issues is we always need voluntary participation from the people that we're trying to help. We need them to want to do the things that we're trying to do to help them. And the homeless population can be a population very distrustful of our assistance. They're guarded. They live in an environment that's just, you can imagine living on the street. It's not healthy mentally. It wouldn't be for any of us. So there's a high amount of frequency of mental health issues and substance abuse issues in this community. So it just creates an environment where it's very hard to establish a rapport. But that's what we do, and that's what the homeless liaison officer does. That's what our officers try to do. That's what the contracted staff we have with Be Well. They're trying to reach out to these people and establish that rapport. Get them voluntary, get them want to take the help that's out there, because there is a lot of help out there. And then also, just the reality is, any municipal actions we take, and something this is the city manager and I talk about, is highly scrutinized by everybody. As a lot of entities are interested in what we're doing and whether we're doing it right. And there's a lot of scrutiny. So that means when we take actions, especially enforcement actions or removal of personal property, we have to make sure we're dialed in and doing that to the letter of the law. And so we feel confident. I can adamantly tell you the city of Newport Beach does stuff in a lawful, ethical, compassionate, responsible manner. I feel very good about how we do stuff. We might take another day to do it, but when we do it, we feel really good about it, and we haven't been burned for anything that we've done in that regard. And just lastly, the last challenge, I would say, is that it's no pun on this word, but the transitory nature of members of the homeless community. We can make a difference today, and tomorrow somebody comes who's never been here before, and we have to start that cycle of outreach and enforcement all over again. And that's sometimes what makes it complicated. We're like, the peer might look bad today, but maybe it was the people there were people we've never contacted and never started that process with. So we got to do that labor-intensive process all over again. So a quick example, we don't have to digest all this, but an example is the transportation center. You probably can't see all the details in that map, but I'm just going to give you a sense of it, just as one place. This was a map I recently sent to my officers so that they were clear on the boundaries there. The transportation center is made up of City of Newport Beach property. It's made up of Irvine Company property, and it's made up of Orange County Transit Authority leased property from the Irvine Company. And there's a variety of enforcement authorities that exist for those different places. So my officers can do certain things in one place and not in another place. And so they have to understand that. They have to understand where those boundaries are and what they can and can't do. And there's different parameters that attach during different times. A lot of the municipal codes that I'm talking about, the urinating or the defecating in public, which is terrible, and I'm sorry if any of you had to see it, that has to be witnessed by our officers. There's some sidewalk obstruction violations, but there's even parameters on that. There's a lot of little drill down details that our officers have to assess before they can do stuff. And there's, of course, trespassing violations that could be enforced in that area. That requires collaboration with like our partners at Irvine Company and our partners at OCTA and the Orange County Sheriff's Department, who police actually are responsible for some law enforcement services for the transportation center. The sense I want you to get from that is that just in that one little zone, there's a bunch of things that have to be understood and figured out to make the best correct decisions for how to deal with the issues there. And just so you know what the city's looking on, the city's encouraging landscaping improvements, making sure the environment's clean and safe for everybody to be there. They're doing work on the parkways right now along Avocado to improve it. That's the kind of thing we have to connect with these other agencies. It affects OCTA, it affects the Irvine Company. So it doesn't just happen in a second. We have to work on it. And there's a lot of maintenance. We've done pressure washing of the sidewalk where there were encampments to try to keep it clean. By the way, people have to move when the sidewalk is being pressure washed. So that's, they realize, well, the city owns this property. We're going to try to maintain it to the best we can within the letter of the law. So that sometimes has a positive effect. And trash removal. bulk property removal. This is just a window into some of the stuff we're doing just in this one particular area. And then outreach. Lately, just in the last week alone, our officers did 22 what we call patrol checks. Some of them were a substantial amount of time in this one particular area of the city. We've arrested some people. We've issued a citation. We issued another citation today for camping because we were able to do it because the shelter was available, the shelter bed was available. And we've transported one subject to our shelter, and Be Well helped with that. That's just something we did in the last week. There's about 10 people who are regularly at that location, and about 10 now on the OCTA property. And a couple people there are pending outreach assistance. So just to give you a snapshot of that one particular area. I'll close my comments with just giving you a little example of some picture-wise of what I mean by some progress. Here's a picture I took a little cloudy day, which doesn't happen often out here, which is why I love it out here, because usually it's very sunny. But Avocado Avenue on February 15th in the morning, there were about 7 tents, if you can see that, on Avocado. And this is a couple more pictures of what it looked like out there. And on yesterday morning, this is what it looked like. There was one left. And by the way, I had an officer, that person moved. So they were violating a municipal code by obstructing more than half of that sidewalk on Avocado they wanted, and they moved to the OCTA property. So just to give you a sense, that's what it looked like after this kind of aggressive, all hands on deck, enforcement, outreach, property removal, maintenance, all the tools the city has in its toolkit to attack an area. In a couple weeks, it was dramatically different, at least from that stretch. Of course, there are still some tents on the OCTA property, which is something we're following up on. This was underneath the Bay Bridge. Does anybody know what the Bay Bridge was like? Did you experience that? So it was very alarming. This was something that grew in a day. It took one day for that to develop, just to give you a sense of some of what the city's up against. And that was January 20th this year. That's what it looked like later that day, after our police officers and public works dealt with that issue. A couple people were arrested there. Some people had outreach and among other solutions the city had. This is just another picture of what it looked like. This was a week later. Some people came back, and there was a new person. January, remember that cyclical, transitory nature of the issue. And then a day later, or later the next day, we cleared it. Just to give you a sense of what we can do and maybe the cyclical nature of it. Another thought, this was pretty dramatic pictures. Newport Boulevard, this is last year in February. There was about 3 encampments generally in the area on the somewhat east side of Newport Boulevard, north of Hospital Road, just to give you a frame of reference. You might have seen it. This is what it looks like when I say public works is doing the dirty work for your city. This is what they're doing out there. A whole team of people are out there. They took 3 truckloads of property, and most of it was refuse. Most of it was contaminated. Most of it we had the statutory authority to discard, and that's what happened there. Some people were arrested here. Some people left, just to give you a sense. And that's what it looked like afterwards. So I just show you that as an example, and here's another example. It's the same area, the same time frame. Again, that's what it looked like prior. That's what it looked like the next day after all that work. So this is just my takeaways. Homelessness, complicated issue. Crime and quality of life impacts are significant. The police department recognizes it. The city of Newport Beach recognizes it. Realistically, these impacts, they can be mitigated. We can have success, but they will never be wholly eliminated. And we have to start with that frame of reference to be realistic about what our expectations are. And then the city of Newport Beach has recognized in recent years a need and expectation to do more. And we've invested time and money to do it. And part of that's what myself and Natalie do. And that we're working towards these long-term solutions. Assigning staff-specific, homeless-specific responsibilities, educating, training our officers on enforcement and outreach options, and developing what I would call defensible procedures about how we are conducting business out there. So this is just a list real quick. If you want to take a quick photo of that screen, it's just some important information. You got the dispatch non-emergency line. That's the best number to call when there's not a real emergency happening, but you see a nuisance or disturbance, you want us to address it. There's a helpline there for CityNet. That's the number to Natalie's office, which I was happy to put up there for her. And the OC Crisis Prevention Hotline for some mental health issues. And you guys got the handouts for good giving, I think, on the way in today. Good giving is, the idea is say no to panhandling, say yes to good giving, where if people want to donate money, we can make sure, the city will make sure that entity is providing it to the resources that will help the people on the street the most, directly help them. And then we'll turn it over to Natalie.
Thank you very much. It's a very exhaustive presentation on the enforcement efforts made by the Newport Beach Police Department. For the remaining minute and 47 seconds, we'll have Natalie Basmaciyan. Natalie has been with the city since 2008 and currently serves as the city's first homeless coordinator. Her responsibilities include providing updates to the task force, attending a number of meetings, managing the social services contract with CityNet. I'll stop there and let you know she is highly qualified to do her job, and we are very fortunate to have her on staff. Natalie?
Thank you for that very nice introduction. My name is Natalie Basmaciyan. I am your homeless coordinator, and I work out of the city manager's office. We're going to go over the Costa Mesa Bridge shelter. The shelter opened in April of 2021 with a joint agreement between the city of Costa Mesa and City of Newport Beach. We started our intakes in May of 2021. City of Newport Beach purchased the rights to 20 beds and on-site services, and then Costa Mesa operates the other 50 beds. Since May of 2021 up until the end of February 2022, we had 51 individuals enter the shelter. If you think about it from people not sleeping on the streets, that's 4,833 nights that people were sheltered at that facility. The average stay is 95 days. And then we have 8 people that are still at the shelter that are matched to a housing opportunity, and they're going through the documentation process. If you don't know, the shelter is on Airway Avenue by the airport control tower. The cross streets are Red Hill and Baker in that general area. The 2022 point and time count was completed at the end of February. This point and time count was actually delayed. It was supposed to be January of 2021. Due to COVID-19, nobody conducted the point and time count. This is a federally mandated count that must be done on a specific night. In this case, we did it February 22nd. We had, for the first time, an early morning team and a late night team. If you recall, that was a bitterly cold and windy day. I was out on the evening team, and we found very few people that we expected to find. Some of our regular people had double and tripled up in motel rooms. They just pooled their money that night. Some people know we're doing the point and time count, and they find somewhere else to stay that night. They don't want to interact with us. And then other people were doubled and tripled up in vehicles. If they knew a buddy with a vehicle, they were sheltering from the cold and wind that night. The official results should be out around April from the county, and we estimate our population to be about 45 to 50 people, again, on that one specific night for 2 5-hour blocks of time. This is not a population. It does ebb and flow depending on the weather, shelter availability. People get hotel rooms at the beginning of the month if they get their checks in for Social Security or disability. So we always have to say that number is going to fluctuate depending on our outreach and all these other factors. So you will see the results coming out, but we're using a working number of about 45 to 50 people. Shifting gears, we have a new program that we launched in September of 2021. Trellis International is a nonprofit that's been operating in Costa Mesa for several years. They started a new program called their Community Impact Team, and this is basically a bridge to a return to work program. This is for people that are experiencing homelessness. They may be at the shelter, or they may be newly housed and they want to keep participating. The teams go out in 4 to 6 people. There's always a designated supervisor. They're in identifiable T-shirts and safety vests when they go out. And they've done things such as clean up Buck Gully, the Big Canyon Gully areas. They've done pressure washing on the peninsula. They've scrubbed trash cans in Corona del Mar. They've done a little bit of everything. They received gift cards as incentives. They're not paid employees. And then when they are participating, in some cases, and 4 that we know of, people have earned paid positions where they were volunteering. So you can start to see this progression where people get the dignity of work, the teamwork feel. They've been isolated and alone on the streets, and now they're part of a team and part of a purposeful plan to move into housing. I should mention also that program is managed through the Public Works Department. As our lieutenant said, Public Works is vitally important to this work that we're doing. Then we have our new Be Well Mobile Crisis Unit. This is a very exciting program we launched on February 14th. This is, as the lieutenant said, a big blue van that is driving around the city, 14 hours a day, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. to start. If we have to adjust the hours, we will. And this van was anonymously donated by a resident for $132,000. That included the van itself, the retrofitting to do the transports, and also all the logos and branding that you'll see on the van. It's always staffed with an EMT and then 1 to 2 mental health and crisis counselors. There's also a de-escalation specialist on our team. She actually worked overseas in refugee camps. So coming to Newport Beach, she's got just an incredible view of how she can help people and how she can help people in distress. And this is not a homeless-specific service. This is not for 45 people. This is for all 87,000 of us, visitors, residents, business owners, employees that work in the city. So if you know anybody who needs assistance, please contact the non-emergency police number that the lieutenant gave, and the team will be dispatched out of the police department. This is the van. We are adding the city logo on that lower part of the van. The rest of the funding for this one-year program, we received $1.2 million in CARES Act funding as part of the COVID relief, with everybody experiencing mental anguish and uncertainty and all of the issues that we've all dealt with during the pandemic. You can see the part of it here. They have lights. It's not an emergency vehicle. That's for their safety if they're working at night. The back, they can transport up to 5 people at a time. One of the seats is kind of a jump seat, so they can use a baby carrier or a child can be transported. Most of their work is resolved in the city. They resolve about 90% of their cases here. In the event that they do have to transport, and I'll mention where they transport, they do this in the van. They can also use the back of the van as kind of a private office area if they need to talk to somebody about sensitive matters. And then if they do transport, they operate a campus in the city of Orange. And what's amazing about this campus, it's 7 acres. They have the first adolescent crisis stabilization unit in the county. Chalk does not have one. They have, what they call their sobering stations. This is 12 spaces where you can sleep, get a clean pair of clothes, get some food, and then see if you want to transition into their on-site sober living program. They also have what's called co-related treatment. So if somebody has a mental health issue and substance use, they go to a separate treatment facility to get the care that they need. And then they're opening a second campus in Irvine. It'll be a 20-acre campus, and that will be down by the Great Park. They just broke ground in January, so they're getting ready to plan that campus, and we'll have admitting rights there as well. Some of the success stories we've already had from the Be Well team, we had an elderly, unresponsive lady basically park her car in traffic last weekend, and she fell asleep. She would not respond to the officers. It took almost an hour just to rouse her. The Be Well team came. They partnered with the crisis stabilization team, and they got her into psychiatric care and contacted her family. So she drove from somewhere in LA County, drove until she got tired, pulled over in Corona Del Mar, and fell asleep. But that's the kind of thing where it's not a crime. It's not a medical emergency. She was not awake, and Be Well filled that gap where we needed that help. I'll get to that. But some of the other things that Be Well has done for us, in the past 2 weeks, they've transported 4 people that were speaking about suicide to our responding officers. The officers were able to call the Be Well van, and all 4 of those people entered crisis stabilization units. That could be College Hospital, it could be outpatient treatment, it could be at the Be Well campus. So we're starting to build this network where we have places for people to receive proper care. We do have success stories. One of the ones that we are most proud of, there was a woman who lived near the Fun Zone and on Balboa Island for 14 years. She was out there 11 years before we had this team in place. It took almost 3 full years to get her a photo ID, access to her bank account where she had 12 years of payments going in she could not access. We had to order her birth certificate. We had to build trust with her. She moved into her new apartment on February 25th. She lives in senior housing in Huntington Beach now, and she's delightful. She got her furniture delivered today. She's going to get wraparound service visits from the county because of the voucher that she has, and she is turning 68 on Tuesday in her new home. We also have a man that was homeless between Laguna Beach and Newport Beach for 12 years. He was basically camping. Nobody knew he was there for 12 years. He finally reached out to our homeless liaison officer and said, I can't keep living like this. I can't produce my art. I can't hold a job. What can you do for me? She very quickly got him into our shelter. He was there for 6 weeks, got his finances together, got stabilized. He moved into his own apartment in Tustin and got a full-time job because he had somewhere stable to stay. We also had a woman. She was a longtime resident at the Newport Pier area. She had a little apartment above Dory Deli. She was there easily 8 or 10 years in this apartment. Something fell through. She lost the unit. She was homeless for 2 years in the city. She had 3 permitted vehicles in the parking lot. She was living her life in Newport Beach. She also entered the shelter. And at the end of January, she moved into her new apartment in Anaheim. She really hustled to do that. She was taking the bus up to Anaheim as often as she could, which she could afford, to help find an apartment where she could afford it and live there. And then finally, we had a young woman. She was 24, 25 years old, living in her vehicle, a Mercedes SUV. You would never know she was there. She lived in the vehicle all over the city for 2 years. She was estranged from her mother and her 6-year-old son. She also entered the shelter and reunified with her family. So she's moved back home with her family. So the Good Giving program ties all of this together. When we definitely house somebody or help them in the streets, the funding for the Good Giving campaign actually helps support these people when they're ready for this next transition. The woman that we housed, Sharon, that we talked about, we're getting her a few household items. She had a lot of things on her own already. The person that we housed, who now has the apartment in Tustin, he was taking 3 buses to get to his new job. Our homeless liaison officer purchased him a new bicycle, helmet, lock, and accessories for the bicycle. It now cut his commute time down. He can go anywhere he needs to now, and he's got the bicycle thanks to the Good Giving program. And then finally, we do use that funding for one-time gaps in rental payments or security deposits. We had a fantastic story about a year ago. CityNet housed a woman who had been living in her car for 2 years. She was full-time employed at a bank in Corona Del Mar. Her employers never knew she was homeless. We got her housed in November of 2020. January of 2021, her hours got cut due to COVID, and she came up short on her January rent. So our public information manager put out an email blast to the community saying these are her circumstances, we don't want her unhoused again. We got an anonymous donation of $1,000 to cover her rent and late fees and keep her in her unit. If you are interested in giving, we have the website up here, newportbeach.gov/give. I also have the handout, Say No to Panhandling, Say Yes to Good Giving. We have thousands of these all over the city. Panhandling is a protected First Amendment right. You're not required to give to panhandlers. I know you're like, oh, should I not? You're not required to. So if you feel better donating to us, donating to a local nonprofit, CityNet, Be Well, please do. Thank you for that. And then we are done with that, and I think we're ready for questions and answers.
Let's give another round of applause for our presenters. That was really fantastic. Thank you both. I want to thank friends in the community that have submitted questions. We also would like to offer some time for you if you have questions. So what I'll do is I'll intersperse live questions to our panel with those that I received electronically. Do we have any questions in the audience? Ma'am.
I do have a question.
Can we hold up until we get the microphone?
Okay. Hi, my name is Pink. Are we on? On. Can you hear me? It's not charged. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Okay. Hi, my name is Pam. I've lived in Corona Del Mar for about 30 years. In the last few years, I have seen a tremendous increase, as I'm sure everybody else in the room has, of homelessness in the encampments. One of my questions is the Martin versus Boise in 2018. Is that what created the situation where the camping pretty much anywhere is, quote, okay? And why?
Short answer, no. Understand that camping is a misdemeanor of the municipal code. The vast majority of contexts that we might even have for camping might lead to other enforcement opportunities for narcotics or other types of crimes, warrants, things like that. So just that law in and of itself isn't terribly problematic because, again, the deterrent effect by the minimal penalty associated even with the enforcement of camping doesn't have a long-term impact on deterring the behavior. It's another tool that we have, and it's a barrier, but it's not the type of barrier to create the problem you're seeing.
Do we know what created it?
I think it's a ton of different factors, of different laws and the environment and socioeconomic conditions that are beyond the scope.
Thank you very much, Pam. Gwen Cruttenden asks, I understand you can't make the homeless go to a shelter. However, if someone is choosing to live on the street, doesn't their logic automatically mean there is a mental health deficit there? Which would mean that you would be able to take them to a mental health facility. People deserve dignity, care, and services, not cold nights living in their own trash. Even Governor Newsom wants to compel them into care. Would you like to respond to that?
Thank you for the question. With mental health issues, people still have some free rights, rights to liberty and freedom and being in our community. And we can't just force people into treatment. The 5150, the 3-day psychiatric hold, the barrier to qualify for that is extremely high. You have to be a threat to yourself or others. You cannot care for your, what we call daily living skills. And until that barrier changes, we still have to go with this Be Well service model and really working with somebody to address their issues. It's not as simple as a police officer rolls up or Be Well rolls up and that person is locked away somewhere. Even for a conservatorship, which is a very complicated legal process, that can take years to establish that form of care for somebody. So I'm not an expert in that field, but we have tried to go a conservatorship route for certain people, and the county does that as an absolute last resort. It is not something where we call them up, okay, fill this out, okay, now they're taken away. It's very, very complicated and involves a lot of different entities to make that happen.
Thank you, Natalie. Question from the audience. Sir.
Hi, my name is Mark Davis. I'm the pastor at St. Mark Presbyterian Church across the street, and I'm the head of the Faith Leaders Council of United End Homelessness. And in our studies, what we've learned is that it takes about 6 beds of permanent supportive housing for every bed of temporary shelter in order to keep people not ending up at temporary shelters forever. And we've also learned that a permanent supportive housing, what the HUD is willing to pay, about 98.6% of those units in Orange County are occupied. That leaves 1.4% unoccupied, which means we have a serious deficit of affordable housing for permanent supportive housing. And that didn't show up as one of the problems, but that to me seems to be where the drain is getting clogged. So could you speak to what the city is doing with regard to permanent supportive housing and affordability? Thank you.
Does everybody know that we already have permanent supportive housing in Newport Beach? Do you know where Cappy's Cafe is in West Newport? There is a 12-unit permanent supportive housing unit for military veterans. It's 11 units for low-income military veterans, and then 1 unit for a senior military veteran. It's been operating in that area for over 5 years. We don't get many service calls over there. The idea with permanent supportive housing, thank you for the question, is if somebody has struggles with mental issues, or they're elderly, or they're a military veteran who doesn't know how to access the VA, the services are on site where the person resides. Let's take, a military veteran with mental health issues. Currently, that person would have to take multiple buses to Long Beach just to make an appointment, keep the appointment, get the services, follow up. The Cove model has the military resources at the facility. So people just go downstairs from their apartment, take care of their appointment, get connected to what they need, and then live in their individual apartments. The City of Newport Beach has already put out a request for proposal for permanent supportive housing developers. We interviewed 5 developers back in November of 2020. They are tasked with finding a property in the City of Newport Beach. We narrowed it down to 2 developers. And we have tasked them with finding a place where we can have up to 50 units of senior supportive housing. Again, with senior services on site, connections to Oasis. And as we start our aging, you're not going to be able to have all of that in your home if you have these other issues involved. So that permanent supportive housing model, it's not for everyone. My woman that was 68 years old and 14 years homeless, she's in a senior apartment complex, but they're not checking on her every day. She's got her own keys to her own apartment. Other people may need a memory care supportive housing or something, more with psychiatric care. So there are many different models for what supportive housing looks like, and we're trying to focus on senior citizens.
Thank you, Natalie. Angela Courtwright asks, is the state considering reestablishing mental health facilities? Why does there appear to be far more homeless than in the past? It seems there are many resources to help those who want to get back on their feet.
The state has not invested a lot of money and effort into mental health services. Even our Be Well program, individual cities are implementing this. This is not a county program. To give an example, there are very few cities. Huntington Beach, Newport Beach, Garden Grove, Anaheim, and Irvine are the only cities that are implementing Be Well right now. And places for them to go are also very limited. I have the document in my office to prove this. For the population in the state of California right now, we have 40 million people. We have the same number of mental health beds per capita that we did in the 1840s. So as our population has expanded, we have not expanded that system of care. And that is a major issue. If somebody wants help, needs help, they're ready for help, where are we going to take them? So Be Well is filling that gap in a very fantastic way, but again, 1 7-acre campus and 1 almost ready 20-acre campus, and that's it in the county right now.
Natalie, why don't we allow somebody else the opportunity? Sir, Natalie, why don't you stay? I'm gonna anticipate that this is gonna be for you.
Hi, my name is Dick Crawford, resident of Newport Beach since 1972, so quite a number of years. 2 questions, Natalie. One, the space and time counting, you mentioned that it was a very cold night. It's in February. It's towards the end of the month. We know that they're all gathering together and hiding in hotels, and they know in the space and time, why wouldn't it be in a different time of year where it's warmer and you get a more accurate count? So that would be one question. And the second question is, we all know that they closed Fairview, which is basically addressing what you just were speaking about, that, we've reduced the capacity. We don't have any more capacity. We've closed capacity. We have a wonderful property at Fairview. A lot of you may know where that is. The state closed that mental facility. Why can't be repurposed and put to good use?
I'll speak to the second point first. That is something that is actively being discussed in the city of Costa Mesa at the state level. I don't know what that outcome may be, but it is actively being discussed to either repurpose Fairview, reopen Fairview. One of the issues that I am aware of is the physical plant capacity on that site is very old. They would need to replace, HVAC and some other facilities to make that a livable space. You're the developer and builder, not me. So you would know better, like how something would have to be retrofitted and repurposed to be able to facilitate that. But there is active discussion on that. As far as the point in time count, part of our contract with CityNet involves a summer census. We go out 3 days in July, mid-July, and again, canvass the whole city. We have grid maps, we have teams, we go out with officers and CityNet staff, and that also gives us a much higher number because it is summertime. People come down here, and stay for a week, or they're transiting through from San Francisco to Oceanside. So if they're in the city, those 3 days, they are getting counted. So if you follow any of our reporting, the numbers do go up into the 90s to 100 people, depending on that summer and winter seasonality. Thank you.
We are fast approaching the end of our program. I'll add, or we'll end with one more from Bill Lyon, who asks, group homes for the addicted and for the mentally ill have been known to lure those with addictions from other states with free plane tickets and advertisements of offers to rehabilitate in, quote, sunny Orange County, end quote. It has been documented that when persons' insurance runs out, they get pushed onto the street, made homeless, and left to fend for themselves with their addictions. The question is, what is the city doing about the growing homeless population from these facilities? And is the city collecting data to measure and monitor this problem?
When we're conducting our outreach, we do find people that have either voluntarily left a treatment program or Tony said, their money runs out, their insurance runs out. That's where our outreach and enforcement team steps in. We might find that somebody, doesn't have their photo ID. It's still at the facility that they left. Now we have to start with CityNet, get them a photo ID, find out if they want to get reunified with their family. Those are not chronically homeless people. Those are people that need this extra outreach and attention to resolve their issues. And this does happen. People might get here thinking they have a job and a new apartment, and then the job offer's rescinded. It could be somebody who, exits that group home and then decides, oh, I'm good, I have some money in my pocket, until the money runs out. And then we're finding people and engaging with them and getting them back to where they can live a more productive life. A lot of the family reunifications start from that outreach. And along Newport Boulevard and some of the other hotspot areas, that is when you see a brand new face, and it's usually a younger person. They don't know where they are. They probably didn't agree to this care plan to come here, and we're trying to get them, de-escalated and focused to get them home.
Thank you, Natalie. There's been a lot of information that's been offered tonight. I think the one thing that I would like to make sure that you appreciate as you leave here tonight, these are the resources that Newport Beach has invested in to address this issue of homelessness in our community. We are in very good hands. I want to thank our panelists. Wonderful. And I will turn it back to the president. Ed?
Okay, thank you, Tony. Natalie and Pete, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. You guys have made a lot of progress since we had our first program on this, so thanks a lot. Really appreciate it. Tony, thank you for being the moderator tonight. Our next program is going to be on April the 13th, so watch for our announcements on that. And also, I want to let you know that we are going to have a program on May the 11th on the elected mayor proposal, which is going to be on the June ballot. And Mayor Pro Tem Blom and Walter Starr will be presenting positions pro and con on the elected mayor ballot measure. So that's something they're going to probably have a lot of interest in. And then, as I stated earlier, the mayor's dinner is now on May the 19th. You can get your individual and underwriter tickets on our website, www.speakupnewport.com. It's going to be at the Marriott Hotel and Spa, which is now known as Vea. It's just finishing up a major remodel, and the mayor's dinner is going to be one of the first events at the new hotel. So be an exciting place to come to and experience the new venue there. Again, thanks to the Bungalow for the food they provided for us, and please support them. They've always been a good sponsor and help to Speak Up Newport. So until next month, be well and stay safe. Good evening.